Dr. Ranganathan, if you can hear me.
Yeah, sorry, I did not realize the question was asked to
Yes.
me. Yeah, good evening, Rahul. Look, a couple of days ago, I gave 6 reasons why I thought the verbal order, if I may say so, by the 2 honorable judges of Supreme Court was completely out of order, pun not intended. And you only have to hear the open threat by the caretaker of Ajmer Sharif Dargah today to behead Nupur and mortgage his house to the person who beheads Nupur to realize the catastrophe the Supreme Court judges have brought upon us. I'm glad that other than the IAS officers or police officers, it is the slew of ex-judges that have spoken against these 2 judges. But I would have honestly preferred had sitting judges also expressed similar outrage. Rationally criticizing a judge or a judgment, Rahul, is as important in a democracy as praising him. Predictably, some chauthi failed leftists and darbaris are bringing up my old quote that I said in context of Prashant Bhushan in light of my criticism of Supreme Court judges that, I quote, there are only 2 kinds of people in a democracy, one who respect the judiciary and the other who think they are the judiciary, unquote. I stand by this quote. There is no contradiction or hypocrisy on my part. Let me explain very briefly, just a minute. Number 1, it is perfectly all right to disagree with a judge or a court judgment while at the same time respecting the judiciary. I have done it multiple times myself, and Rahul, I dare say so have you. The first time I did it publicly, I recall, was as far back as a decade ago in 2012 when I was really critical of the Chief Justice of India, Altamas Kabir, I think his name was, saying that ideas can be punished. I have since disagreed with another Chief Justice when he snootily packed off Abhijit Iyer Mitra to jail for 40 days for merely being sarcastic. I was critical of the last Chief Justice when he stayed the farm laws and refused to remove illegal blockades. Being critical of a judge or disagreeing with a judgment, especially one that is not a considered, written, bench-derived one, but rather a verbal utterance that ultimately doesn't go into an order, is not thinking that one is the judiciary. Sorry. It is simply being critical. I have on multiple occasions praised the judiciary too when they merit. Number 2, what I do not do, Rahul, is what these communists and anarchists and darbaris do. Cross the boundary every single time a judgment is not to their liking and slander the judge with vile, unproven accusations of corruption, nepotism, blackmail and quid pro quo. Sure, you must be allowed to, in my view, get away by calling the judiciary, the legislature, the executive and the press as corrupt. Because corruption is an overarching subjective label, as morality and ethics are also attributable to it. However, when you single out a judge and accuse him of quid pro quo through cash or kind, that is defamatory. When you defame Justice Chandrachud by bringing in the legacy of his father who had to apologize in the wake of the Loya judgment, when you attribute quid pro quo in the wake of the Ayodhya judgment, when you incite people to pour onto the streets in the wake of the Narmada judgment, when you hail Justice Diwani as a hero after he overturns the trial court acquittal of 3 Hindus in the Viramgram riots case and convicts them, but call him a shameless BJP stooge and a villain when he acquits Kodnani. When you do all this and more, you are not respecting the judiciary, you are becoming the judiciary. I trust the difference is clear now, even to these chauthi fails and darbaris.
Well,
yes, Rahul, thank you. Just give me a minute because Ashutosh, my good friend that he is, took my name. So I am duty bound to rebut his frivolity. I hope, Ashutosh, please, you will not interrupt me because I need to make 2 points. Number 1, Ashutosh said that I would have liked, had my friend Anand also mentioned Nupur and the difficulty it put the nation in. I'm sorry. I have been mentioning Nupur for the last 5 weeks and no one has criticized and blasted this government, BJP government, for throwing Nupur under the bus. So please get your facts right. Number 2, at the risk of being beeped yet again, let me just remind Ashutosh कि अगर तुम में दम है तो ये बताओ कि नुपुर ने blasphemy कहाँ करी है, but that's besides the point. Number 2, Rahul, I wanted to be gentlemanly and did not want to name my good friend Ashutosh directly, but the facts are there for everyone to see in 2 cases. Number 1, Ashutosh has joined the party where the president said, I am proud to be an anarchist. He was the one who said that Justice Denani, when he acquitted Maya Kodnani, was a BJP stooge. And he was the one, Ashutosh, who praised the same justice for convicting and overturning a judgment and convicting the 3 Hindus in Viramgram case. He was the one who came on to the streets upon the call by Medha Patkar when she said, let us openly defy the Narmada SC judgment. तो ये anarchists हैं, ये खुद अपने आप को जज समझते हैं, नाम हम लोगों का बदनाम करते हैं. Ashutosh, I hope I am very clear now. I have talked only facts. If anything more you require, आ जाओ JNU आ जाओ, coffee पिलाऊंगा और तुम्हें एक बार फिर से facts बता दूंगा. Good evening, Rahul. You know, I was well prepared to speak on the matter, which is the issue today, for a couple of minutes. But can I please take 30 seconds first up, because I'm absolutely disgusted and appalled by what the Congress panelist has just said, especially because there are two panelists out here, in fact, one anchor who is a Kashmiri Hindu. According to this congressperson, he's saying, why is 75% of the population, i.e. Insinuating Hindus, they possibly, he's saying they are under paranoia or there is some phobia. On one or two instances, he's saying, why is so much of outrage? One or two instances. Does this gentleman even know what happened in 1990 Kashmir? There are two Kashmiri Hindus sitting there. Look at this man gloating right now. Rape, murder, ethnic cleansing. 5 lakh Kashmiri people driven out from their own land. And this gentleman has the gall to say there are only one or two instances and all this is paranoia, a figment of imagination. Do you know what happened in post-poll violence in Bengal? 50,000 Hindus are still living in Assam, driven out. Hundreds of instances, lakhs of people pouring onto the road chanting Gustakhe Rasool ke. There is a fellow panelist right now who refused to condemn this slogan. And this man is saying, he's outraging that there is some helpline to help the Hindus. You know, I would have let him, let his diatribe and his rubbish go, not responded to it. But you see, there are people out here, there are panelists like Aarti, like you, whose families have directly suffered. And this is the reason why, after 20 years, they will simply refuse that a genocide happened in Kashmir. People like this fellow. But can I please now come to this topic, because what I wanted to say was very clear, which is that any help or support or defense rendered within the ambit of the law should not only be allowed, Rahul, it is fast becoming a necessity. Why should anyone have any issue with it? I'm appalled. It's distributing a helpline illegal. It is absolutely ridiculous that some are outraging on this. 3 issues here, very briefly, Rahul. Number 1, let me illustrate the usefulness of a helpline with an example, with a tragic example, unfortunately. We all know what happened to the tailor of Udaipur, Mr. Kanhaiya Lal. He was beheaded merely for expressing his support for Nupur Sharma. And it is increasingly becoming clear that the help to the jihadi killers of Kanhaiya Lal came from many prominent Muslims and organizations as well. One of them, Gauhar Chishti of Ajmer Dargah, has been arrested. He was on the run. A week before the beheading, Kanhaiya was being threatened. He was even arrested. He had to shut his shop. There was a recce of his place. All hell had broken loose. His address was leaked by his neighbor. And the police, rather than help Kanhaiya, actually ended up helping the killers. Now imagine, had he used this helpline on day one and some Hindu organization had immediately come forward and helped him, one can never be sure, of course. But there is a strong possibility that it might have deterred the killers too. Now imagine what the families of the Hindu victims go through, not only in such cases of murder and intimidation, but also in cases of forced marriage, cheating, grooming, or this love jihad. Imagine what tens of thousands of Hindus went through in the post-poll violence in Bengal. Rapes, murders, ethnic cleansing. And what happened? The state as well as the center were mute spectators, and so was the Supreme Court. Just the Calcutta High Court took a brave stand and castigated the state government and Mamata Devi. But there too, judges had to recuse. There was so much scare all around. Rahul, let us be clear. Hindus are 5th-class citizens in this country. The state hardly ever comes to their defense. The executive, the legislature, the judiciary, the media. You want one more example of this? Kashmiri Hindus, I just told you. 7 lakh of them. Refugees in their own land, raped, murdered, pillaged, ethnically cleansed. No one helped. And even 30 years later, the judiciary says it is too late to prosecute the perpetrators. Finally, Rahul, just 30 seconds. See what happens on the opposite case. Scores of Muslim organizations, even political parties like AIMM, rush forward to pay fees for legal defense, even of stone pelters, arsonists, and in many cases terrorists. Forget helping victims. Here, perpetrators are being helped.
See what is happening in Ajmer, the dargah that earns 200 crores every year. Hindus contributing majorly through donation. See what the three caretakers of dargah are saying. One of them wants Nupur beheaded, the other helps. And let me tell you one more thing, finally 10 seconds. I am not going to bet against the possibility that many organizations will come forward and actually help the killers of Kanhaiya Lal. Legally, monetarily, even politically. Everything is stacked against the Hindus, Rahul. The helpline is actually a lifeline.
Madhav, it's quite amusing to see the developments, especially on this Kali issue. There is, on the part of a filmmaker, I think her name is Miss Leena, there is a clear intent to provoke. I don't know whether you're, up to what her statement today has been. And I'm quoting her. She is now saying that Kali is not a Hindu goddess. So obviously there is a clear intent to provoke. Now with the leftists, you're never sure whether they're deliberately doing this or by the design of their cerebrum, they are like this. But nonetheless, this is a time-tested leftist and Islamist strategy to take the focus away from the real issue, Islamic terrorism and jihadi fundamentalism. The idea is to draw an equivalence and then say, look, people who criticize Hindu gods and goddesses are also getting threats. I am actually surprised that it has taken this long for them to drum this up. Normally, they do it in a matter of hours. Remember what happened barely hours after those Bangalore blasphemy riots 2 years ago, where the Dalit boy was accused of blasphemy and Islamists ran riot, set shops on fire and pelted stones and injured scores of policemen, 60 of them. Remember how the narrative was shifted within hours to Muslim making a human chain around a Hindu temple to protect it from being attacked? And then the whole of next day, that particular news was amplified and the focus on Islamic fundamentalism and punishment for blasphemy in Islam was diluted. Look, it goes without saying that any kind of threat against any kind of quote-unquote blasphemy is condemnable as far as I'm concerned. But that's the thing. These Chauthi fails actually are for handing out punishment for blasphemy. But only if blasphemy is carried out against Islam, not against Hinduism. Remember how every last one of them, including Ms. Mahua Moitra, wanted Nupur arrested immediately. And that too for merely quoting Islamic scriptures. Selectivity and hypocrisy runs in their blood. When it comes to Islam, remember how PM Manmohan Singh, on the floor of our parliament, demanded an apology from Denmark for the Prophet cartoons. Remember how Sonia Gandhi publicly apologized to Shahi Imam of Jama Masjid? But when it comes to Hinduism, it's a free-for-all. All those Gau Mutra jibes, terming Hindu god Parshuram a terrorist, a rapist, celebrating Tipu Jayanti, praying at the tomb of Aurangzeb, now even saying, as I said, that goddess Kali is not a Hindu goddess, you name it. And if the idea is to demean Hindus and Hinduism, they have done it. From Jinnah, who represented Rajpal's assassin, to Iqbal, just 30 seconds, to Iqbal, who carried his coffin, to BSP candidate Qureshi, who offered 51 crores bounty for killing Charlie Hebdo journalist, to Asaduddin Owaisi, who exhorted the annihilation of Kamlesh Tiwari. The thing with Islamists is, they are unapologetic about their Sarfar-Sajuda agenda. The problem, Madhav, just 10 seconds, is with moderates who are embarrassed by this and therefore want to minimize the damage and draw out equivalences that will cushion Islamist thought and extremism. Till today, whenever you brought up Rushdie, they brought up MF Hussain. Although there was no fatwa against Hussain and Hindus fought against him legally. Now, when you bring up Nupur, they will just you wait. They will always bring up Leena and her film Kali. Thank you. Dr. Pandya, just a very simple question. You know I respect you and your profession, what you've done. You're a COVID warrior. But here, can I please express my disappointment? Because one is at the altar of political expediency. You're throwing one of your own. When you say that you condemn Mahua Moitra, this is what Mahua Moitra said. She said, Kali, goddess Kali is meat accepting, alcohol accepting goddess. Please tell me, is she factually wrong? Yes or no?